Oh. Hey everyone! Sorry for the long wait. We were having some technical difficulties trying to go over, but thanks for all of you being patient. I see you guys all chatting in the group chat, so that you could keep each other entertained while we were switching over.
Way to keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
But thank you all for being patient and welcome back.
Okay, there we go. I think we're all set if everyone can hear us okay. But we were just barely over on talking to Shalise and Jonathan on Close to Consciousness. And hi. we're so excited to have you guys now on our channel, on our side. And I mean, I almost just want to like pick up where we left off because we were talking about all these different spiritual experiences.
And they go hand in hand.
Yeah. So. And, you know, talking about the spiritual experiences that Sam had and that Shalise and I have had within the mainstream LDS church before. And the fact that all of those can be valid and you can be remembering those and that those can all be important pieces of your journey and still be able to recognize and look back and say, that might not be what I thought it was at that time, depending on spiritual influence or manipulation or however you want to look at it. And so we wanted to have Shalise and Jonathan on our side and kind of look more at the spiritual influences or how some of these high demand religions, or in the case of your channel where you're talking to people who are in cults, you know, how do you see spiritual influence or spiritual manipulation in people's experiences, or things that might be good and positive and beautiful be twisted in ways to ultimately profit these organizations
or control people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think if I may kick this one off, Shalise.
Sure.
Yes. So you're right. I think one of the things we touched on in previous episodes with you, and also just this past live that we did, was how people have these spiritual experiences, whatever they may be, but they are very real things. What a cult leader tends to do is take that and flip it on its head and say, that is a result of what we're doing, what I'm doing. And that does not necessarily invalidate the experience that the person is having. There's just something to look at when it comes to why you are following this person and why you are kind of reinterpreting that feeling. I think that's the idea behind that.
Right.
Yeah.
Very well said. Yes.
That interpretation, right? I think that's like kind of what we were trying to start. We're starting to get into that on your channel, that it's so much the interpretation of how you look at that and how you view those spiritual experiences. The only way you can view them is through the lens of what you've been raised in, really. I think even as little children, no matter what you're raised in, whether you're raised in religion or you're not even raised in a religion, no matter what, you see through things through the lens of how you're raised, through your parents' lens. And so it's tough to try to decide for yourself, right? Or you guys say individual sovereignty. How do you decide and figure out what you believe those experiences to mean versus what you're told?
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of it can be confirmation bias. I saw someone bring that up in our previous live chat before we came over here, which is definitely a real thing. So, for example, if you grew up believing in Jesus and then something happens to you, and then maybe you see a picture of Jesus laying somewhere, you're like, oh, this is further confirmation that that was Jesus helping me. But if you saw a picture of Buddha, you would just be like, oh, like it wouldn't mean anything to you unless you had a connection already and had that confirmation bias to want to make it mean something. And it's okay. I mean, we all do that. We all like to draw meaning in places, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's part of being human and trying to make the world make sense. But just recognizing that that might be at play is something that's really important if you're trying to distance yourself from a group who you've had these experiences with, but you don't want to deny your experiences in totality. So I think that's one thing. And one that you kind of mentioned already is just monopolizing emotions. So anytime you feel something good, you are taught, usually in high demand groups and cults, that it's because where you're at is where you're supposed to be. Like if you're in church and you get a warm and fuzzy feeling, maybe someone's, in my case, in mainstream Mormonism, I remember people bearing their testimony and crying, and this beautiful thing happened to them. And it's just like, wow, that's amazing. And you get all choked up, and they tell you that's the spirit. And that means that you have a testimony that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is true. And so they tell you all your good experiences or all your good feelings are because of them but really you're just having a human experience. Because if I were watching a movie, if I'm watching Notebook and I'm crying because they've like died holding hands, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful, I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, the Notebook is true. Like,
Right.
it doesn't really make sense. And no one would believe that either. Everyone would be like, that's really dumb. So why do we have the same type of connection when we go into these groups? Because we're taught that that's what needs to happen. We're taught that if you feel something good, that means that it's true. And so I think distinguishing those is really important. And I have like a whole list of things, probably take longer than 45 minutes to get through. But do you have anything to add before I move on to the next thing?
I would just say the connecting with human emotion, like you were talking about the Notebook. I always now, Kelly Clarkson, my girl, Kelly Clarkson, she's the one who she was like, I'm a contagious crier. And I was like, that's a perfect way to describe me.
Right.
Like when I see somebody else start crying or having emotion, I instantly feel that and empathetic towards it.
Yeah.
And so now that's like my new saying. I'm always like, I'm just a contagious crier. And so I was that person that had so many spiritual experiences where people's emotions really hit me hard. And I think also recognizing and learning, everybody has different things that will hit them emotionally differently. Like some people, it's music. Some people,
Yes,
it's
music.
dance.
Yeah.
Some people, it's these different things. And so recognizing which one you are, and then noticing, okay, if I'm crying when they they film to the mom behind Dancing with the Stars, and they're like, the mom's so proud, and that makes me cry. Well, there's no like truth or belief system in that. It's just, I'm a contagious crier.
Well, and you
Right.
can empathize with that mother, because that's another thing, is we see ourselves in other people, and when we see them having an experience, we usually just mirror it back and relate. How does this relate to me? How does this make me feel? And if you have any sort of connection, you automatically get those same types of feelings. Like now that I'm pregnant and I see things with kids, I'm even more of a ball baby. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so sweet. But like before that, yeah, it would have been touching, but I wouldn't have felt so strongly about it. And so that's in one of my things that I have listed here under environment is group settings that are created to make you have these feelings. So who remembers fast and testimony meetings? When everyone gets up, it's once a month, fast and testimony meeting. So first of all, you're not eating, you're not drinking, you're a little like loopy anyway, which puts you in a brainwave state automatically when you're a little hangry and you just like, oh, I want to get through this. You get into this group environment that these high demand groups have created on purpose. I call them indoctrination sessions because when someone gets up and they relate their experience, if you have any sort of emotional reaction to them, you are taught to believe that that's because you have a testimony of the church. And then all of these people are getting up and doing the same thing. And first of all, there's a peer pressure too, because you think, well, they know it's true. What's wrong with me? And so you kind of make yourself want to feel something just because you feel like you need to, or you are othered if you don't feel the spirit. And so that's a huge one, is environment. And then you also mentioned music, and babe, jump in anytime, by the way.
Yeah. Well, before you get to music, I mean, from what you're saying about the whole idea of, the confirmation bias, and you're in the setting where other people are experiencing this thing, and you're looking around and you're like, why aren't I feeling it? I mean, a lot of why people join cults to begin with, on top of this idea that they're helping save the world and they're bringing good into the world, is that they are wanting to be accepted. So it gets you right there, where I'm not feeling what they're feeling. I want to feel accepted the way these people feel accepted. So that's where, we mentioned in our previous episode about mental gymnastics that you do. A lot of the people that join these cults are the intellectuals that can trick themselves into thinking this thing is true, that can do those mental gymnastics because they want to be accepted.
Yeah. And I would even say too, as far as group settings go, a lot of times when you're in like a ward, these people become like your family too. And I think the more connected you are to a person, like Sam tearing up on your episode about his spiritual experience, then I was tearing up because I love Sam so much that his experiences mean so much to me, just on the basis that I love him, you know? And I had an experience at like many experiences at what was called EFY, or especially for youth, right?
Yeah.
And you go at 14 years old and you go and it's like one guy to one girl, and it's you go to religion classes every day for a week. It's a summer camp and there's all these amazing experiences. And man, I still will like, I'm almost getting chills now just thinking about like singing in the choir and singing praise to the man on the stage with like 50, 75 of us all in the same age group. And we had grown such a tight bond between all of us. And you just all are there for the same purpose.
Yep.
And you're all saying, we believe in the same thing together. We are not alone. Like the power of community is
It's
so
huge.
huge.
I was even going to bring up the MTC, or the Mission Training Center.
Right.
So after I left the FLDS church, not that long after, I joined the mainstream LDS church. And then not long after that, I served a mission. Long story, just going to get right to the point.
My gosh.
And in preparation for my mission, which I served in Chile, we spent several weeks in the Mission Training Center there in Provo. And talk about a very large group of people, all with the same purpose, there for the same reason. You know, a lot of trying to create this bond. And I don't know, like you're saying, when you get that many people for the same reason and for the same purpose, it definitely makes you feel something and makes you feel that you're there for a very good cause.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's another thing. It's therapy. It's very therapeutic to get up and share your feelings. How often do people do that in real everyday life? Not very often. And so church, I think, can sometimes just be big group therapy. And so people are going to have feelings. They're going to spill out feelings that they've been holding in all week. They're going to want to talk. They're going to feel welcomed to talk about these experiences. And so it creates the perfect environment for everyone to be on board and be like, yes, 100%. I support you. I love you. And Melissa, you mentioned this over on our channel. Maybe it's just love that everyone's feeling, but they've co-opted it to mean something different. So again, I want to clarify, because I don't want anyone to be confused about what we're talking about. We are not saying that spiritual experiences are not happening. We're not saying that they're wrong. We're not saying we don't believe in them. We are saying that when groups of people manipulate those beautiful human experiences for their own power, gain, money, whatever it is, that's when it's wrong. And that's when we want to be able to distinguish what is going on within you, in your space, in your mind, in your heart, and what is going on in the cult, and how they can be separated and how they don't have to be enmeshed. So I just wanted to make it very, very clear, because I don't want it to be misinterpreted that we don't think any of this is good. We also just want to illustrate that cults are very good at creating those perfect environments, the space where you do feel comfortable to open up, and you feel comfortable to express something that maybe you've never told anyone before. And someone else has that feeling and they think, oh, the church is true.
It also preys on your weaknesses, and a cult leader tends to kind of redirect. So in the case of Nexium, if you've watched The Vow, there's 2 seasons on HBO. Keith Raniere, he's in prison now. But yeah, something would happen to, so Mark Vicente, he was a guest that we had on, where this is like a self-help kind of cult, where he was starting to question and starting to distance himself from Keith, and Keith picked up on that. So knowing basically everything about Mark, he then had a class that was kind of dedicated to Mark the very next day, and they kind of redirected Mark and got him back in line. So I think cult leaders are also really good at kind of seeing what your weaknesses are and seeing when you're pulling back, and then getting your attention back and back on track to where it should be, which is appeasing them.
Right. Yeah. And I feel that there's a lot of people that are able to do it in a way that it seems that they're doing it for the greater good, and it's all out of love and kindness. And then you have people that take it to the extreme, like Warren Jeffs, right? And that's the one I'm most familiar with, where he sees that people, like you said, Jonathan, people start to distance themselves or disagree a little bit with something they do, and boom, power move. And he just shows that he can do whatever he wants and people will go with it. And he does those things so that people are afraid to disobey him. So it can start out as a good thing in some cases and end up as something very scary later on, if that's what the leader feels that he has to do.
And in the meantime, all that's happening too internally is the self-policing, which we talked about in a previous episode. You feel guilty during this time. You feel bad that you're questioning everything. So they prey on that too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And also going back to the whole like, wow, isn't that amazing that the leader did this thing? How did they know? Or what are the odds? Here's a very hard example. So we were doing Jehovah's Witnesses series, I think, a few months ago, and we were talking about how they would actually troll obituaries and then show up at the family member's home to try and convert them, knowing that they just lost somebody.
Yeah.
So really dark. Yeah. And so
Wow.
in that case, this person is grieving. They are in just a low mental state, or maybe their hearts are opened. Maybe they're wanting to think that their loved one is somewhere else, and then knock, knock, knock. Guess what? We know what happened to your loved one. This is what happened. And they may interpret that as a spiritual experience or confirmation that this church must be true. Look who just showed up.
Yep.
But it was completely manufactured.
I think you bring up a great point too. So mentioned Mark Vicente. So in his case, he was actually scouted by Keith Raniere.
Yeah.
Because Mark is a filmmaker and they needed a filmmaker to help with the basically propaganda. So he was specifically scouted. But that is the thing. That's such a great point in that starting with the right clientele, if you will, is really important. So in the case of, I think it was JMS that we did, this is a Korean kind of like reboot of Christianity. He is the new, this Korean gentleman. He's now the new Jesus incarnate, basically. But they were going to American colleges because your mind is so ripe and it's not exactly matured to a point where, you're thinking the best, but also you're open to things. And in the case of Liz, who we interviewed, this cult, this is what happened to her. She had come from like a extreme Pentecostal upbringing. So they surveyed her and people on college campus with, how do you tell us about your spirituality? So it starts, one of the things I think we're going to get into here in a bit is like the boiling the frog, how it starts so benign and then it gets really, by the end of it, you're doing all kinds of crazy things, 10 years later.
Right.
So in her case, this survey was really just general and like, do you want to do good in the world? What do you believe in? And then they harp on the people that are really susceptible to falling prey to their tactics.
Right.
Yeah. So the right clientele.
Yeah, definitely. I think it might be you said JSW, right?
JMS.
JMS. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting my JMS. My brother served a mission in South Korea, and he said there were some really like very strong cult groups that would like follow the missionaries around and try to like kind of bother them, but also follow them and see like if they could talk to the same people as them and just
crazy
kind of weird stuff like that too. So I'm not even surprised they were looking for people who, if they're talking to the missionaries, then like maybe we can talk to them too.
If they're open to a new idea, maybe we can jump in there, right?
Yeah, he said it was super creepy, and they would just like have to be like almost mean and be like, "You need to stop following us." Like,
yeah. So speaking of state of mind, when you're preying on vulnerable people, and you prey specifically on those who are in, I don't want to say a weaker state of mind, but maybe a state of mind that they would have brushed something off had they have been in a different headspace. So one thing that we know that they do within the environment, manipulating the environment, is they put people into like a theta brainwave state at church or wherever it is, the place of worship, or it doesn't even have to be religious. We could even say that definitely about New Age mysticism and how they get you in this meditative state so that you're more plausible and they can manipulate you afterwards. So they call it almost like an autopilot, the theta brainwave state. So if I'm thinking back to my church experience, it is like you are barely awake. You are just trying to get through. You're kind of listening, you're kind of not. You're daydreaming a little bit. But this is the brainwave state that makes you really impressionable and makes you just be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. You're not really sharp. You're not really alert. And this can also be done with music. We briefly talked about that. So I find this really interesting. We've been in contact with someone who, from the very beginning, when, I don't know if you've heard of Hillsong, the mega church, they have been in the news a lot lately for things that have been going on, considering SA, but they originated in Australia and they were actually a music label before they became a mega church. So this person he actually was part of the music team, and his job was to figure out ways to manipulate the crowds with the music that he was told to compose.
Oh, wow.
So he would tell us, he's like, yeah, they would say, okay, he would basically score the entire sermon. So he knew when the pastor starts getting really intense, the music would build and then he would get quiet. And then it would be this certain type of music to literally hypnotize you and put you in this trance so that the words of the pastor would hit you so different. And ever try
like a
watching a
movie.
scary
Oh,
movie
yeah.
on mute?
Yeah. There's some, oh my
Not
gosh.
very
Okay.
scary.
When you have
No.
little kids, okay, so our kids are pretty young, and there's definitely times where we would like try to watch something that sometimes is scary, sometimes not, and then we mute it during the scary parts.
Not
Yeah,
scary.
you watch a murder scene with mute, and let me tell you, you're like, I
Like,
feel nothing. Like,
the
there's
music
no-
the music makes such
a
a
huge
big difference. In my growing
Yes.
up years as well, that was something that was kind of pushed on us, is the church leaders, Warren Jeffs especially, and a lot of other people he would have make music, and it was what we were required to listen to always, on the way to work, on the way back. We had an intercom in our home, and some of the mothers would put Warren Jeffs singing to wake us up in the morning throughout the speakers throughout the house.
It's so creepy, guys. We should
And-
really share with you some of the music because he
Yeah.
still
But-
has it.
But that's the thing, though, is when you're raised in it, it did not seem creepy or scary to me. It was like, oh, this is so peaceful and beautiful. I can't imagine a more spiritual and better way to wake up than to listen to Warren Jeffs singing. This is just amazing, right? That's what I thought, because like you said before, is when you're brought up in it and you just get little bits and pieces along the way, and they keep adding up into something bigger. By the time it's something bigger, at that point, it's all normal and it's just perfectly
Yeah.
fine, because that's what you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
flipping through, and you'd have like the CDs in the car. So when Sam and I were dating, and I was like, "Oh, I'll pick some music." I had to like corrupt him with music. I was like, "Let's listen to something that's not soft rock or like Motown."
I graduated from Warren Jeffs to Motown, so I was making some big moves there.
When we started dating, I was like, "We're gonna move beyond Hillary Duff, Taylor Swift."
I was gonna say, is this beyond Miley
Like,
Cyrus era?
Let me
Oh,
teach
yeah.
you what hip hop is. Let me teach you. I'm like, let's go a little hard with like our country rock. Like,
Yeah.
we're gonna go a little
Yeah.
hardcore here, babe. But I'm like flipping through his CDs, and then it's like Warren Jeffs space. I'm like, is this really? And goes, well, not only is it Warren Jeffs music, Warren Jeffs sings it because he's full of himself.
Wow.
And I was like, no. And so then I put it on. I couldn't even last through one song, not only because of like his voice, but the indoctrination in the song. It wasn't about like I was a primary chorister, right? So it's like, I am a child of God and he sent me here, which I would figure, that's pretty like regular religious messaging. But then Warren Jeffs is like, follow and obey the prophet, follow and obey me. I will never lead you wrong. Like stuff that anybody could listen to outside of his group and admit that like it's so far beyond regular religious messaging. It was like very, very creepy
And
about pure obedience, being purely obedient and being pure and clean and pure and obedience, like just on repeat. It was crazy.
I listen to it now, and I immediately hear the words and I say, whoa, what am I listening to?
Yeah.
But also, this is where it gets a little crazy here, is I've been out now for 16-ish years, and I hear those songs and it takes me right back as far as the feelings that I felt. And I'm like, oh, like I have to like shake myself out of it. Like, no, because it's so powerful. And the messages, the words, the lyrics in these songs were so powerful. And I didn't even realize it until I had left that I had all of these songs memorized.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to say next, was repetition. Like that's such a big thing in these spiritual experiences. And you just said it perfectly. When you hear the same song over and over and over, and you're in that environment and you are conditioned to associate this music with that environment, when it comes up, you're going to be put back in that environment. It's just how memory works, right? Sense memory. And so the repetition of that, and not only singing, but chanting certain things, or get me started on the Young Women's theme. I will know the entire thing. And like tell me to say part of the middle. I don't know what the middle is, but if I tell you from the start to the end, I bet you I can tell you what it is.
Also, In a lot of cases too, I mean, we're talking about music and repetition and like the rhythm basically, but it's not just that. In the case of Warren Jeffs, it's also just wasn't his normal cadence very slow and
Oh,
monotonous, and
yes.
the idea
Uh-huh.
was to get you in this hypnotic space.
Very
Yeah.
monotone.
Oh, I don't.
Mhm.
Some people
It's
ask me to try to talk like he talked, and I don't like to do it. So I don't. I think I've forgotten at this point. But yes, very much just. Oh man, what's something crazy?
they
What?
like drag on the ends of the words, I feel like. And sometimes the way, like, if you don't know who Warren Jeffs is and you just listen to him, a lot of times I feel like it can sound the same as like speakers in the LDS General Conference.
Oh yeah,
You
totally.
know, it has that same, like, a lot of the speakers end up sounding the same, which is interesting. I feel like sometimes when people try to be their most spiritual self, they imitate the people that they believe are spiritual as well.
Sure.
And so you see a lot of speakers that, like, even the General Women's Authority. So you have like a woman who would not sound anything like the man, but they have the same intonations as their
Mhm.
priesthood leaders or the prophet. And so everybody gets soft spoken, and
So
they always end, and sisters.
right.
I was just gonna say that's so good.
We need to be always loving. It's always at
Yeah.
the end, so we can have emphasis, so
Right.
that people can take a moment to really truly feel the spirit.
And it's
And
a little
then-
quieter, so
Yeah.
you listen.
Yes.
Jonathan's like, but see, because Jonathan's like, I wasn't raised in this. I don't know. But there's certain things, right? Like, okay, if they're talking softly, it's almost you have that feeling of like, okay, they are really trying to make me listen. I have to listen harder. They're soft spoken. They're trying to do it gently. They're trying to do it
Yeah.
kindly. You have all of these emotions and feelings when people have that soft spoken monotone. And then I think there is that feeling of, well, if that's how I've heard every prophet speak my entire life, these people must have the same authority because they speak the
Yeah.
same way. And I think that's Warren Jeffs, even in his revelations, and we were talking about this, I think, on our video with you, he talks like he's writing the Bible, right? Why is he
Mhm.
talking in biblical terms? Why is he sounding like the Bible and the Book of Mormon? And part of that, I think, is because he thinks it adds validity to him.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, now he used to do a little bit of a better job writing kind of how the Bible sounds, but now
Yeah.
the way he speaks, I like have to read a sentence 6 times to figure out what he's trying to say. It's a little bit challenging now, but something else I've noticed, and I'll just say from the FLDS, and maybe other groups have seen this too. I would love to hear people's thoughts on this, but it seems like those that are being submissive, or in the FLDS keeping sweet, kind of their tone goes up at the end of a sentence, like, just make sure that you're believing and following Father. Just make sure that you're being obedient. That's how the women will often sound out there. And the men, the ones that are in charge, will often drop at the end of the sentence. Like
Interesting.
Warren Jeffs will often say, just know that this is coming from Father. Or, like they'll drop down at the end. And so I don't
It's
know
the
if that's
authoritative speaking.
is that how it is? Is that a
It
real
is.
thing?
It is
Okay.
a real thing because I've learned that in acting class.
Oh, okay.
The intonation actually changes your authority. And so a lot of times, like, this is a very simple example, and I thought of it because I did 2 self-tapes today. But when you say your name, instead of like, "Hi, my name is Shalise Ansola," that's like,
Uh-huh.
"Do you believe that that's your name?" Because it
Right.
sounded like it's a
Almost a
question.
We're questioning it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or, "Hi, my name is Shalise Ansola." That has authority, and that's like, "That's who I am, and you better listen to me." So it's
Yeah.
totally a thing. Have you heard any of the
Australians
Watchtower
talk?
guys?
Yes, I
'Cause
can listen to Australians
everything's
talk
a
all day.
question.
I know, they have the best accents.
They
Um,
do.
Okay, move
So,
it. No, I'm just kidding.
Jehovah's Witnesses, have you heard any of their Watchtower tapes? Because they could
think so.
easily be any person in General Conference. When I listen to it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, they really all talk the same. It's very slow, and they infantilize. That's another thing, is they talk down to you so that you believe you're as if a child. Oh, I must be obedient, and they know better, and I don't know anything. And they treat you this way, and that also creates this sort of, well, I don't know better. Wow, they're amazing. It's the brothers and sisters.
Mhm.
We are gathered here today to talk about chastity. And like,
Oh, wow.
it's just, it puts
Good
you in
job.
this
Dead on.
hypnotic state, and where you're like, oh wow, I must listen. And that's also a very impressionable place to be in, because children are very impressionable and children want to soak everything in. And when they treat you as such, you're going to have these certain feelings. It's just how it works.
Yeah. No,
Wow.
it's interesting, like I said, to see all of those similarities, and that it's not just one group. And and we've said it before, I'll say it again for people who are just barely on. We are not trying to make fun of anything or anybody's experiences or how these people are, but noticing the fact that there are certain ways that people can be made to feel based
Yes.
on how people are presenting the information, how they're speaking, their intonation, all of these
Mhm.
things. They're not, it doesn't mean that those specific things are bad. It means that when people ever use them to try to control or manipulate you, that's when they can take something that can be good and normal, and they can also twist it to be not good and not, like Warren Jeffs,
Right.
and people can
Mhm.
take anything that's good to an extreme and turn it into something bad.
Right.
And so
Mhm.
just a reminder for people who are hopping on now and wondering, why are you guys talking
what-
like people from the pulpit?
Yeah. Well, and it's good to be hopefully people within these groups, since a lot of people have reached out to us and have been able to share with us some of their experiences, and realizing that other groups are doing some similar things makes them realize that maybe what they're in the middle of isn't so good. But what people
Mhm.
need to make sure we're watching out for are the dangerous groups that are doing things that are actually hurting people. I mean, this new
Yeah.
documentary, the Daughters of the Cult, the
Mhm.
LeBaron group. I mean, the stuff that Ervil LeBaron would use, and he would actually pull things from the scriptures, from the Bible or the Book of Mormon, and twist it in a certain way so that his followers believed that he was just doing what the Bible's saying, but he would twist it in a way that would allow him to get away with horrendous things. So that's just
Mhm.
that's the scary thing behind some of these groups that are twisting words and making it seem okay.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and just to triple, quadruple down on what you guys are both saying, I think spiritual experiences can be amazing. We talked about group therapy earlier. Yes, that's awesome. Create that environment that makes people want to open up. It's a healing space. It can be beautiful. And also recognize when you're in a group that may be dangerous, maybe you're starting to recognize that it's dangerous. Start to open your eyes a little bit and look around and say, are they manipulating this environment to make me feel a certain way? Are they making me feel a certain way? Or would I feel this way if we were in a different setting? Would I feel the same conviction or have the same spiritual experience if I wasn't surrounded by other people who were having the same spiritual experience? I'm sure people in the chat, if they were or are mainstream LDS, how about when church went online? Did you have that same conviction, that same spiritual experience, or was it a little dull? Did it feel a little kind of like meh? Like, it seems like a lot of people started to question their faith over COVID because they had space from that environment, from that container that is very meticulously, carefully curated to make you feel things. Again, not saying feeling things is wrong, but just remember that it's okay to check around your environment and wonder if these things would still be true if all of that wasn't very specifically curated for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Or just to piggyback off of that too, what is that feeling or influence or those experiences? What is the action that you are making because of that? Does that make sense? So
Yes.
I feel like that's a good indicator of whether or not, I mean, again, even within Mormonism, like the experiences I had, if I'm not making a negative decision or a harmful decision and away from it, then those spiritual experiences can be fine. And not only are they valid because I felt them, but then if they're not causing harm, that's one thing.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
important to see, okay, I'm feeling this. Is it just making me feel love and acceptance and love from a higher power, love for myself, love for humanity? And if you can take a spiritual experience and have the positivity from it, then awesome. And like you said, then you just have to be aware of when anyone tries to use that and they're asking something of you or they're making it about something else. If I'm feeling
Mhm.
love for my fellow person who's bearing their testimony about something, and then it's a reminder or a call to action for I can't think of an example right now, but a call to action. And now I'm feeling like I need to make some kind of decision or some action that's against what I would have done before. That might be a red flag of, okay, they're trying to use it for some kind of action in their favor rather than in for your personal favor.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's tricky. It's tricky to navigate what's good, what's bad, what's okay, and what's not okay when you're in the middle of one of these high demand groups. So just, I guess it's, if you feel that you are being controlled in any way, step back, look at your surroundings and say, is this what I want for me? Is this what I want for my children? And if not, then do something about hopefully trying to get out of the situation, because it's just coming from the FLDS. I look at it now from the outside looking in and I think, wow, how could anyone really go along with that? But when I was in the middle of it, because it was what I was taught and raised to believe, it was hard to identify any problem with it. So, but I did identify a problem with it. And that is why I moved out. And that problem was that I was being told that everyone outside of that religion was somehow bad or lesser or on Satan's ground. And when I went searching for myself and found out that wasn't the case, that's when my eyes were opened and I realized it wasn't true.
Yeah. And I think the easiest way to break the cycle and get out of that, break that mentality, is to look at other groups and see how you really feel about them. So if you're in something and you have this spiritual conviction that this is the one true church because of spiritual experiences that you have had within it, and you look at another group, let's just say Scientology. Well, they don't really have spiritual, well, I don't know, maybe that's a bad example. Let's just say Jehovah's Witnesses, because that's an easy crossover. If you look at Jehovah's Witnesses and you're like, clearly they're not doing it right. They don't have the priesthood. They don't have whatever it is that my group has. But someone over there is saying they were miraculously healed. If you can logically say, were they though? But you can't say that about yourself, that's when you need to really start to look at what's going on, because it's so much easier to point it out in other groups, and it's so much easier to see it in other groups than in your own. But you have to be willing to give that same level of scrutiny to yourself and to really dissect it. It's really just the awareness that we talk about. Just be aware. If you have this amazing experience, like Melissa was saying, and it's not hurting anybody, it's just, wow, that made me feel like a really good person, or that prompted me to go help somebody else. That's amazing. Do you? That's great. But if you have a spiritual experience that is prompting you to become more racist or something, to hurt another group of people because that's what this leader is telling you to do, because you have such a strong testimony of this leader, you really need to start questioning where this is coming from, if that's really what you want, or if you are being manipulated into doing things that are not for the good of everybody.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yes, very well said. Yeah, and I was just thinking about what you were saying, and it made me think about kind of some concerns that I had when I was strongly believing in the mainstream LDS church too. I don't often talk about this, but something that kind of woke me up a little bit too, or it was kind of a shocking experience, was when I started looking into these other groups, like you said, Shalise, and realizing that these people in these other groups that I used to look at and say, oh, it's crazy, 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 obviously don't have the truth. I realized when I looked in a little deeper that they are just as convinced in their belief as I was in mine. How is that possible? How is it possible that they are just as convinced as I am? And so that really got me looking and wondering about what I was doing and what everyone else was doing. And anyway, so just something else to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Do you have something to add, babe?
Well, your list, how long is your list over there?
I think we got through it, actually.
Okay.
I have musical manipulation, chanting, theta brainwave state, which is the autopilot, group worship, repetition, pressure to experience something. Then we have the leader and his conviction. The more you believe in a leader, the more likely you are to believe anything the leader says. And monopolizing human emotions, normal human emotions.
And then we briefly talked about the boiling of the frog thing. You think that's worth getting into, or you think we kind of covered it in other episodes?
Sure. Yeah. How things grow over time.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
they always say you don't join a cult, you join a good thing. You usually start because you are an idealist and you want to make the world a better place. And you start in a very simple place. Before you know it, you are looking around you and going, this stuff is pretty out there. It's pretty dark. But at this point, I am so invested, whether it's a financial investment, a physical or mental investment. This could be years down the road. So at that point, you're just doing whatever it takes. I think we mentioned that it's the sunken cost fallacy, where you're just like, well, at this point, I'm so invested that I just have to keep going. So you get to the point where you are believing, if you're a Scientologist, in Xenu. That's the final level, final boss. I believe in aliens. If you are, I mean, pick your cult. So yeah, boiling the frog.
Yeah. No, it's totally true. Like you said, it's never, you never go into anything, or even when you're born into it, right? Like then you're just kind of slowly boiled from the time you're a child, but you're
Slowly boiled. You're real well done by
slowly
the time
boiling
you're
children. No, I'm just kidding. But
That's an awful image.
I know, sorry. So, but just in the mentality of like, you don't know any better, right? And it's just the piece by piece by piece. And ultimately, I think all of us have said pretty well at this point in the fact that the best thing you can do is to draw those parallels, recognize those around you. I would say for us too, it was really liberating to validate other people's spiritual experiences.
Yeah.
Like being willing to say, that person in Buddhism, they are having a real true spiritual experience, and that is okay, and it's not a threat to my own beliefs. Because I think sometimes too, when you think you have like a monopoly on spirituality or a monopoly on like the one truth, and you couldn't feel the spirit, like, okay, well, I have the spirit because I was baptized. You can have the light of Christ, which is kind of the same, but kind of different. So I do have an upper hand on you, but like those are good. Like when you're trying to compare so much, instead of saying what you felt can be real to you, and I accept that, and I can understand that, and I can separate the fact that I don't have to like come to terms with it somehow, how you could have an experience and I could have an experience. And you can draw those parallels between each other and say, oh, you feel that? I feel that when I listen to music too. And then maybe that helps you understand your spiritual experiences more and the interpretation that you feel like in that moment, because we're all on spiritual journeys, whether we want to say we think we know, nobody knows everything, right?
Right.
So whether you're in a religion and you're super religious, whether you are an atheist, it doesn't matter. Like any spectrum of anything, you still have certain beliefs that you hold at this moment, and those are always can change and are fluid, and you might learn more or grow more in certain directions. And so I feel like being open to that and being willing to look at your spiritual experiences through different eyes as you gain different perspectives is probably, I think, one of the most important things or messages that I would want to say out of this.
Yeah, I love that. Everybody's on a journey of some kind, and I feel that everyone has these experiences that are either spiritual or otherwise, whatever you want to call it, that really help them grow as a person and help identify who they are. And that's okay. You know, I love what you said. Now that we have kind of stepped out of the religious aspect of everything, I guess, and don't really consider ourselves that religious at this point, it gives us an opportunity to look at everyone else and say, you know what, it's okay if this person that believes something entirely different than what I do has a spiritual experiences. That is okay. And it doesn't mean that it's not actually there, that it's impossible for them in any way.
Yeah. Amen to all of that. I would add I would add something that really stuck with me, and that's because I lean more in there is an afterlife, but there's not a guy on a throne like sending us to heaven or hell. More of just like a spiritual experience in general is this quote that was, we're not humans having spiritual experiences, we're spiritual beings becoming human or having a human experience, because that really takes the level of religion out of it, and it just recognizes everybody as a soul instead of someone who may or may not be connected to the divine. Like, you're connected because you're baptized and you're not connected because you're not my religion or whatever it is. Take out the human side of it and just recognize everyone as a soul. I think it's a really beautiful way to say, yeah, we're all kind of just like dropped into this body, and we're hoping to figure it out, and we're trying to have positive experiences, and no matter how we gain those positive experiences, it's all beautiful and it's all okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. About you,
Yes.
Jonathan, anything you want to add? And then maybe we can take
Well,
a few questions
yeah.
and we'll probably just go like another 5 minutes, if that's okay with you guys.
Well, kind of piggybacking off of what you're saying, yeah, the idea is kind of like we are all God in that sense, versus there's like the mouthpiece of God, right? These false idols, these false prophets are claiming to be the mouthpiece of God. So, Shalise, I think what you're kind of referring to is this idea of all like leveling the playing field, and we are all then kind of God.
Divinity within us,
Yeah.
not to be blasphemous, but divinity and God or source energy or whatever feels good to you all resides within us. So if we can just recognize that in other people, there's no gatekeeping this whole spirituality thing or religious experience thing.
Yeah, I
Right.
want to clarify God as in we are having the spiritual experience as a whole in mass. Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. Awesome. Well, if it's okay with you guys, let's do like 5 minutes of questions
Yeah.
and then we will let you guys go. Also want to share some starred ones here. Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy.
Oh, thank you so much on our side. That's so sweet of you. We're so happy to have you in the first part and now again here.
Yes, thank you for coming over.
Thanks so much for the super chat too. We appreciate it. And then, someone just showing love support. Thanks so much, Katie,
Thank
for
you.
the
Thank
super
you.
chat. We appreciate it. In the live, there were a couple. I was trying to.
Yeah, the questions were coming in quick. We're sorry if we
we
didn't
skipped
get
any of
your
them.
question, but thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And what was this person? Oh, Mike from Profiling Evil.
Oh, hey, Mike.
Hi, Mike. We're so glad you're here. Mike's awesome. If anyone hasn't seen his channel, he's done great work helping people get out of cults. Like, he's amazing. But he says, good discussion tonight. Thanks for sharing. There are marked differences in members who are converted to an ideology and those who are generational, like Sam was. That is definitely true. You know, we talk about the boiling of the frog, and it's, you know, when you're born in it, it's a whole different thing because all of us, you only have what your parents tell you. That's how you survive, right? Like they tell you the stove is hot and a car could hurt you, or, you know, don't cross the street without mom or dad. And so you don't know anything else. And that's a lot different than the spiritual experiences that would convert you to anything or those different worldviews, I guess, coming in on it.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you for that. Good insight.
Let's see. I'm trying to find. Again, I'm like, since I was chatting so much that I lost some of them. But lots of people just saying, you know, thank you, and that. Let's see. Oh, they're asking about Warren Jeff's monotone, which I think we covered.
We did cover that a little bit, but thank you all so much for your support, questions, and love here.
New questions, new comments.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm like trying to go through this now. And
we're trying to catch up last second here, but
here we go.
While you're looking at these, I was just going to point out as well that some of it as well is intuition, and something that I saw very clear was the mother's intuition that my mother had, and some of what I think was just this strong connection with her children that at the time I looked at as very spiritual experiences as well. And I have a lot of stories of things that just would generally make no sense, where I was in deep trouble and somehow she knew, and I was nowhere near her. And so that's something else that I think as humans we have this bond and connection that is almost difficult to explain. So just another thing that kind of ties into all of this.
Sometimes I think it's funny that like we as humans sometimes like we find it completely natural that like certain animals will have instincts. Like we're like, oh, well, it makes sense that like, you know, a mama bear can sense her cubs in danger, but we think it's weird if like a mom, like a human mom senses their child in danger. And I think sometimes we like lose that intrinsic, like you said,
right.
Those things within us.
Right. So
people just saying, I'm learning so much. Thank you. Do you have a link? Oh, these are other
Well,
people chatting in
if
there.
we did
We'll let 'em
miss
go.
questions, we'll try to go through all of these questions and comments that you had after the live ends, and we'll try to get to some of these and respond to you if we didn't get to it here. So
Yeah, we'll let Shalise and Jonathan go. Thank you guys so much for being on. It was such a fun chat.
Yeah.
For those of you who didn't see the first half and possibly just came on our channel, then hop over to their channel and watch the first half of our live where we talk about, in particular, some of the experiences that Sam had, spiritual experiences and miracles within the FLDS, and how those spiritual experiences can, really double down your faith.
Right.
And even in groups that have bad leaders or have bad things happening, how people can still be in those and have faith promoting experiences, and that's a big reason why people will sometimes stay.
Right. Yeah. So definitely hop over if you haven't already seen it. We were just on their channel. So Close to Consciousness, I should specify. So jump on over there as well. And thank you, Shalise and Jonathan, for being here with us today. It's been great.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. It's always fun, and I feel like we could chat for hours. Well, we have already since knowing each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good time. We appreciate it.
Of course.
Thanks so much.
Well,
And
thank you all so much.
And we'll talk to y'all soon.
We'll talk to y'all soon.
Bye.
Bye.